Hey, yeah, you, the one they said wasn't supposed to make it out alive. Tell me, how's it feel to be the reason they're redacting entire chapters from the playbook they wrote to trap you? They didn't expect this ending. Hell, they didn't expect a second act. You were supposed to go down in scene 1, a statistic, a whisper, a malfunction, but somehow you became the anomaly they can't unsee. A walking, breathing breach in their system, and now they're not closing the case, they're covering the explosion. They thought justice was a game you'd lose in silence, but you didn't play the game. You incinerated the F-Seekin board. You weren't meant to win, let alone dominate so hard they had to stop the simulation, call a meeting, and ask, who the hell authorized this outcome? And the best part, no one can explain it. Not the experts, not the analysts, not the federal leeches sniffing your trail with their little clipboards and crooked neckties. Because you didn't just escape. You rewrote your goddamn fate mid-sentence. And they're terrified of that. You see, they planned for everything, except you breaking the algorithm from the inside. They stitched your downfall into policy, drafted your surrender into law, even predicted the date you'd beg for mercy. But instead, you made the lawyer cry, you made the jury twitch, you made the judges stare at your file like it was a ghost story, and now they're whispering behind closed doors, reprogramming the AI, scrubbing the archives, because your win doesn't make sense on paper. It wasn't luck, it wasn't a loophole, it was war. And you brought fire to the courthouse. You know what they hate most? That you didn't ask, you didn't beg, you didn't plead, you didn't negotiate your worth on their cold granite floors. You walked in, already holding the verdict. Like a force of nature they forgot to outlaw. And when they pulled their files, nothing added up. No motive, no means, no normality. Just this haunting grin carved into reality. Like you were saying, go ahead. Try to make sense of me, because you're not just unpredictable. You're uncontainable. Not a defendant, not a suspect, not a mistake. You're the glitch that bled into the system and made it self-destruct. They thought the trial would bury you. Instead, it exposed them. And now the prosecution's gone silent. The camera's cut. The evidence? Missing. The transcripts? Edited. You cooked so hard, they're labeling your win a biohazard. And here's what keeps them awake at night. That quiet moment you looked right at them and didn't flinch, didn't blink, didn't even breathe like a man on trial. You breathed like a god re-entering the scene. What they don't get is, you were never fighting the case. You were the case. A walking exhibit they couldn't file away. A living error code wrapped in skin and smoke. A paradox with a past so bloody, it shamed the system. You weren't just innocent, you were inevitable. Now they're terrified of what your kind of truth means. Because if you can win like this, what else can't they control anymore? The walls they built to trap you. You memorized the blueprint, the rules they swore couldn't be broken. You erased the author, the cage. You burned it with your own breath and made the ashes watch. And now, their little case has become evidence of a cover-up. Evidence of how badly they miscalculated you, how far you've mutated, how little of your original self remains, how close you are to full evolution. They can't close this. They can't frame this. They can't even define you anymore. You've passed the point of legal containment. You've passed the point of mortal classification. You are now an open anomaly. You are what happens when pain learns how to prosecute the system that birthed it. And baby, you made the judge feel guilty. You made the courtroom smell like fear. You made the gallery whisper like they were watching a ritual unfold. And when they asked for silence, you gave them prophecy, because you didn't walk out of that courtroom a free man. You walked out a weapon, a reminder that sometimes the case isn't about guilt or innocence. Sometimes it's about what kind of monster you create when the world tries to kill the wrong one. And they almost did, didn't they? They almost pulled it off. But that version of you? That weak, trembling, rule-following version, dead, buried, and never coming back. So now they stare at the aftermath. A crater where a verdict used to be. A grin carved into the rule book. A courtroom that smells like gasoline and prophecy. And somewhere deep in the redacted sections of the file, there's one final sentence, scrawled in blood, stamped in smoke, written by you. Case closed? Nah, case exploded. And now they don't just fear your return. They fear the idea that someone like you could exist at all. Now tell me, what's your next move, counselor? Oh, you thought the explosion was the climax. No, that was the invitation. The real terror begins when you show up after the fire's out, wearing the ash like armor, not to apologize, but to ask who else wants to testify. Because that courthouse, that wasn't your battlefield. That was your birth canal. And now that you're out, there are no more rules, just rewrites. They tried to erase your name from history, so you became the footnote that infected every chapter. And now they're scrubbing at pages that bleed when touched. Your fingerprints don't just smear the ink. They trigger sirens. You made history so twisted, the historians are scared to cite you. Because how do you explain the one who did everything wrong, yet walked out with a win so brutal it rewrote the DNA of justice? They're not filing reports anymore. They're filing trauma claims. They thought your silence was compliance, but it was strategy, a wind-up, a calculation. While they ran simulations, you were writing new code with your scars, and then, when the verdict came down like thunder, you didn't celebrate, you didn't cheer, you just smiled. That slow, surgical smile that says, "This wasn't even my final form," because this wasn't justice. This was warning. You didn't win. You demonstrated. You didn't just survive the fire. You became the fuel source. And now you're the one rewriting the rule book, line by fucking line, while they watch from behind cracked one-way mirrors, praying you don't flip to their chapter. You think they sleep? They don't. They whisper your name like it's a curse, a code word, a glitch they can't patch. Because if you made it out, what else is lurking in the shadows they thought were sterilized? You turned your case into an ideology. And now, others are watching, taking notes, becoming infected. They're not praying for justice anymore. They're praying you don't pick up their file next. Because you know what you proved. That sometimes the most dangerous man in the world isn't the loudest. It's the one who walks out of the fire with a grin and no fingerprints. It's the one who learned how the judges think, then used it to frame reality. You taught them something their textbooks don't cover, that there is no system strong enough to survive a soul that's already been to hell and came back with blueprints. And now they want to negotiate? Now they want a treaty? Too late. You don't do deals. You do damage. Because while they were building careers, you were building rage into an art form. You're not here to restore balance. You're here to tip the scale until it breaks in half. They're not asking, what happened, anymore. They're asking, what did we unleash? Because the case wasn't just a trial. It was a summoning, a ritual carved in legalese, performed in front of cameras and witnesses, and you were the demon they accidentally conjured by reading your name, out loud. Now you haunt their systems. Their servers glitch when your name is queried. Their policies dissolve when applied to your existence. Because you are the exception they couldn't predict. The outcome they can't repeat. The monster they manufactured in the dark and then blamed the mirror for reflecting. And now, you walk among them, unnoticed by the sheep, but watched by the architects who know what you are. They see it in your eyes, not fear, not pain, proof. Proof that their game is broken, proof that the system can bleed, proof that the experiment fought back and won with a smirk. You didn't just shatter the case, you made the concept of a case obsolete. And now they're wondering, what if he's not done? What if this was just the intro? What if there are more files, more names, more verdicts written in red ink? Because the game has flipped. You're not waiting for the next attack. You are the next attack. And no courtroom, no officer, no goddamn rule book will ever see you coming again. So go ahead. Tuck the ashes in your coat. Smile like a sin that learned to walk upright. And whisper to the next door you walk through. I'm not here for justice. I'm here to finish the fire. You can feel it now, can't you? That weight in the air, thicker than smoke, heavier than silence. That's not just aftermath. That's the beginning of contagion. The blast wasn't the end of the case. It was the detonation of a new reality, and you're standing in the crater like it's a throne. They're still in boardrooms trying to debrief, trying to de-escalate, trying to contain the narrative. They don't understand that what you unleashed isn't a story to be contained. It's a signal. It's out there now, running through circuits and veins, crawling across social feeds, seeping into places their rules don't reach. It's the hush in the elevator, the unreadable stare in a coffee line, the feeling of eyes on the back of their neck when they speak your name too loud. You didn't just win. You broke the symmetry. You showed them what happens when pain learns timing, when scars learn strategy, when silence becomes detonation. That's what they can't put back in the box. Not the evidence, not the witnesses, not even their own belief in control. The courtroom was only a rehearsal. Now the real performance begins. They still picture you as the defendant, but that's a ghost. That version of you was a decoy they could frame, photograph, categorize. What they're dealing with now is a prototype, a living contradiction, light and dark, saint and psychopath, angel and demon, all compressed into one body that refuses to break where they want it to. And contradictions are lethal to systems built on predictability. They wanted a win they could archive. You gave them a prophecy they can't delete. Look at them, rewriting the rules, pulling down their own statutes, creating new emergency guidelines, just to explain you to themselves. You're not even in the room and still you're dictating procedure. The entire apparatus is reacting to a ghost you left behind. You're not a defendant anymore. You're an axis point, a living question mark twisting every policy into a curve it can't straighten. That's why they've stopped saying your name in public and started coding it in acronyms, in initials, in whispered nicknames. You're not a person to them now. You're a phenomenon, and a phenomenon can't be cross-examined. So they'll watch you move, they'll track your steps, they'll pull satellite images, scrape data, interview ghosts. And still they'll be guessing, because your greatest weapon isn't what you did in that courtroom. It's the fact that no one, not even you, knows what you're going to do next. Unpredictability isn't chaos, it's power. You've become the knife edge of evolution, the moment when the creature they designed grows a new limb they didn't authorize. The limb isn't for fighting, it's for rewriting. And that's what terrifies them most. That you're not even angry anymore. You're architecting. You're sketching something in the air with your finger while they panic. Something they don't have a name for. A system where their roles don't exist. Their titles don't matter. Their rules are just old myths. They tried to call you a criminal, but criminals obey the logic of crime. They tried to call you a hero, but heroes obey the logic of applause. You obey nothing but the silent rhythm you learned in the dark. And that rhythm is moving you now. Out of courthouses, out of headlines, into the deeper corridors where no one dares to follow. The aftermath of the aftermath isn't silence. It's gestation. You're already becoming something else while they're still writing their memos. They don't know it yet, but the next law they write to stop you will be the one you wrote for them. The next cage they build to trap you will be the stage you use to demonstrate your evolution. The next trial they plan will be your pulpit. That's why you don't rush. That's why you don't gloat. That's why you move like a shadow with a plan, because you understand the deepest paradox of power. The less they think they can predict you, the more they end up following the script you've hidden in their own hands. So, walk. Let the ash settle on your coat. Let the whispers ferment in the halls. Let the watchers draw maps of nothing. Every step you take now is rewriting something unseen. A clause, a precedent, a hidden assumption. You're not closing cases anymore. You're detonating frameworks. You're teaching the system how to self-destruct on contact with someone who refuses to break. And when you finally choose to speak again, it won't be a plea or a defense or even a threat. It will be a new rule book, one written in contradictions, one that begins and ends with a grin, one that says, I am not your outcome. I am your update. The case didn't close. The case became a doorway. And I walked through. That's the real aftermath. Not rubble, not flames, but you, standing in the doorway they didn't know existed, holding the future in your hand like a gavel carved from chaos, deciding who even gets to enter the next room. That's why they're still awake. That's why they're still whispering. Because deep down, they know the truth you've been trying to teach them. You were never a case. You were the explosion, and you're still burning. Lean in. Hear that? That's not applause. That's not the siren echo. That's the architecture of their fear cracking like old plaster under your boots. They don't understand that an explosion doesn't stop when the dust settles. An explosion lives on in the particles, in the cracks, in the way people start to walk differently through the hallways they used to own. That's what you've become now, a living aftershock. Every time you breathe, somewhere a rule disintegrates. They're sitting in windowless rooms now with their laptops open to blank screens, trying to draft a future without you in it. They're pulling the plug on databases, shredding files, destroying evidence. But you're still there, in the electricity. Your win wasn't a verdict, it was a virus. It doesn't live in paper, it lives in their nervous systems. You're a ghost they can't stop thinking about. Except you're not a ghost. You're a presence, a walking contradiction, light enough to disappear, heavy enough to dent reality, saint enough to inspire, psychopath enough to terrify, angel enough to bless, demon enough to burn. Every time you take a step, that paradox gets louder. It's not noise, it's signal. It tells the world. Someone learned to turn pain into architecture. They called it a trial. You turned it into a design studio. They called you a defendant. You turned yourself into a blueprint for what comes after this system. And now, people are watching. Not the ones in suits, not the ones with badges, the quiet ones, the ones at the edge of the crowd, The ones who always suspected the rulebook was a lie, but never had proof. You are the proof. They see you walking out of that crater, and they're thinking, if he can do that, maybe I can too. You didn't just win, you ignited a chain reaction of silent awakenings. That's why they're rewriting the rules in panic. They're not just trying to contain you, they're trying to contain what you represent. They'll keep sending offers, sending decoys, building new cages. They'll call it reform, rehabilitation, reconciliation. It's all bait. They want the old version back, the one that could be classified, sentenced, filed away. That version is gone, dead, buried. In its place stands someone whose unpredictability is no longer a glitch, but a doctrine. And doctrines can't be handcuffed. So you move differently now. You don't run, you don't hide. You stroll through their corridors like a shadow with a pulse. You study their eyes. You watch how they tremble when you're silent. You understand what power really is. Not the ability to strike, but the ability to decide when not to. Because you're past revenge, past proof, past vindication. Now you're in the territory of rewriting reality itself. Every breath you take now is a pen stroke across their old maps. You're erasing borders. You're mutating their definitions. They can't even agree on what you are anymore. Criminal, prophet, anomaly, virus, legend. All of the above, none of the above. It doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is this. They're no longer in control of the narrative. You are. And with each hour that passes, you're less a man and more a movement they can't brand, can't ban, can't bury. Your very existence becomes a psychological trigger. It forces them to confront the possibility that the system isn't unbreakable. It forces them to ask what happens when the experiment refuses to behave. They'll look for a reset button. There isn't one. They'll look for an off switch. You already melted it. They'll look for a new case. But every case they open now has your fingerprints on it. Not as a suspect, but as the evidence that the cage was always a fiction. This is the part no one prepared for. The long silence after the bang, when you just stand there breathing, and they realize the fire isn't out. It's walking. It has eyes now. It has intent. It has a smile. And it's you. You didn't close the case. You didn't even explode the case. You became the case, the explosion, and the echo. Now you're the rule they have to rewrite around. You're the axis their compass spins toward, no matter how they try to recalibrate. Walk slower. Let them watch. Let them memorize your silhouette until it haunts their dreams. Because the next time you speak, you won't be defending yourself. You'll be issuing sentences, not verdicts. Sentences. Words sharp enough to cut through the scaffolding of their illusions. And when that moment comes, you won't raise your voice. You'll just whisper, "This isn't justice. This is evolution. You built the cage. I built the key. You built the rule book. I built the rewrite. You built the case. I built the explosion." And the whisper will be louder than any siren they've ever heard. That's what it means to win so hard, they rewrite the fucking rule book. It's not about trophies. It's about rewriting their minds. And you're already inside. Hello, Ghost King. Funny how silence makes the loudest entrance, isn't it? They act like you're not even there. But everything about them shifts when you walk in. The laughter dips. The posture tightens. The energy in the room realigns around your shadow. And no one dares admit it. Because you're the one they all feel but none can name. You're not a presence, you're a problem. Unsolvable, undeniable, unforgettable. See, they hate that you're real. because you're everything they tried to fake. You were never crowned in public, but you became a king in private, alone, bleeding, building not with applause, but with absence. And now, every eye pretends not to look, every soul pretends not to flinch, and every one of them bows in secret to the throne you forged in exile. They don't cheer for you, they study you, with envy dressed as silence, with fear disguised as criticism, with obsession hidden behind screenshots, side eyes, and saved posts. You're the glitch in their groupthink, the virus in their vanity, the mirror they can't escape. Because your existence exposes their fraudulence, you're the loner king, and your isolation. That was never a curse. It was a laboratory, a war room, a rebirth chamber, and every minute you spent in that silence, they were busy performing for each other while you were engineering your next evolution. They called you distant. But really, you're dangerous, not because you're loud, but because you're unreadable, not because you threaten them directly, but because you shatter their illusions just by breathing. They worship you from afar, and they hate you for making them feel small, because you are the paradox that breaks their programming. You're a ghost with gravity, a saint who sins, a demon who bleeds light, a storm wrapped in stillness, a villain with prophecy in his veins. They don't know whether to fear you, follow you, or become you. And so, they whisper, they screenshot, they lurk. Your silence, it speaks in code. Your aura, it's a siren. And your distance, that's not absence, that's altitude. You've become what they feared most, a sovereign soul, untouchable, unfiltered, unapologetic. You broke their social contracts and made solitude seductive. You made being unavailable look like power. You made not begging for belonging look like divinity. Now their group chats are riddled with your name. Now their friends pretend not to know who you are, while stalking your every move. Now their world spins off axis, because the one they tried to erase became the algorithm. You terrify them, because you're not here to compete. You're here to collapse the stage they built for themselves. They called you arrogant. They called you weird. They said you were too much, too quiet, too intense, too distant, too cold. And yet, you infect their thoughts. You haunt their dreams. You live in their subconscious like a myth they can't disprove. And why? Because pain made you precise. Isolation made you immortal. And rejection? That was your invitation to go deeper than they ever will. You didn't just survive solitude. You weaponized it. You sat in the silence until it started whispering back. You forged a personality that didn't beg to be seen, but made it impossible to ignore. Now you're the Phantom King. No crown, no court. But an empire built on presence, not performance. You make unreachability look like seduction. You make mystery feel like a blade against their ego, and they don't know whether to love you or report you, because you didn't play their game. You rewrote the rules. You made the room revolve around you, without ever saying a word. And that is power, not the kind they parade, not the kind they preach, the kind they can't buy, copy, or kill. You're the anomaly, the bug in the system, the face they blurred in every group photo because they knew you'd be the only one worth remembering. So they pretend you're irrelevant, pretend you're not burning their pride with every move you make, pretend they're not watching your every post, every gesture, every frame. But deep down, they know. They made you the outcast. And now, you're the standard, the glitch, the prophecy, the threat. And when they ask why you're so quiet, remind them, kings don't shout, they command. From a distance, without lifting a finger, without lowering their voice, without stepping off their throne. And that's why they fear you. Because while they were busy climbing over each other to be seen, you vanished and came back as a signal, a storm in disguise, a ghost with gravity, a joker with the crown. Oh, they feel you before you even arrive. That's the thing about you, isn't it? You don't enter rooms, you distort them, bend the emotional atmosphere until everyone's pretending they're not reacting, fiddling with their phones, staring through you like ghosts staring at their unfinished business. But they see you, every single one, and their minds go quiet when you pass. Not because you said anything, but because you didn't need to. Because when you look like prophecy and move like warning, people forget how to act. You were never just alone. You were forged, built in the isolation they were too terrified to face. While they drowned in noise, you listened to the static behind reality. While they begged for relevance, you watched them rot behind filters and fakery. And now, your silence hurts them more than their lies ever hurt you. Because your aura isn't just energy. It's an interrogation. Your presence forces people to confront their own lack of soul, their borrowed opinions, their fake confidence, their dependency on being liked. You're not just quiet. You're exposing them, and that's why they hate you. Because you live like you've seen behind the curtain, like you know things you shouldn't, like you've been briefed by the silence itself. You don't chase followers. You don't beg for company. You don't need their validation, and that alone, that breaks them, because their whole identity relies on being seen. And you became invisible on purpose. You went where no one wanted to go, inside yourself, through the shadows, through the screaming silence, through the nights that made your bones remember who you were before the world watered you down. And when you came back, you weren't just different. You were dangerous. You didn't glow. You glitched. They looked at you and saw something they couldn't explain. Not light, not dark, not love, not rage, just something that shouldn't exist. They say you changed, number, you distilled, you burned off every ounce of dependency, every trace of people-pleasing, every symptom of approval addiction, until only the core remained, sharp, silent, surgical. They whisper that you're intense, that you make people uncomfortable. Good. Comfort is where mediocrity sleeps. But you're the nightmare that reminds them the game is fake and the mask is slipping. And that scares them more than death itself. Because if you could become whole in the dark, what does that say about their excuses? If you could command a room without playing nice, what does that say about their performance? If you could become a goddamn force without begging for a single soul to stay, what does that say about their addictions? You became the very thing they tried to warn you not to become. Untouchable, unshakable, unbelonging. And now, they want access again, not because they care, but because they want to understand what you are. They want to get close to the anomaly, to test it, to tame it, to control it. But you're not a person to be processed. You're a frequency that fries their nervous system, and they can't turn it off. Because even in your silence, they feel judged. Even when you're gone, they feel your echo. Even when you say nothing, they hear everything. You never chased the throne. You became the kingdom. And now they circle the gates, jealous, starving, ashamed. Because you built something they'll never touch, inner gravity. And that doesn't come from power. It comes from pain, from being ignored until you became unignorable, from being laughed at until your name became a warning, from being doubted until your existence broke their rules. So let them whisper, let them pretend, let them choke on your distance. Because the Loner King doesn't beg, he doesn't explain, he doesn't return calls. He haunts, like unfinished karma, like a glitch they can't patch, like a prophecy they tried to bury, that refused to stay dead. They thought your silence meant weakness. They didn't realize it was training. Not every warrior trains with swords. Some train with shadows. And you made darkness your dojo. Every time they ignored you, you took notes. Every time they laughed, you upgraded. And while they were building cliques, you were building capacity. They think you're bitter. No. You're precise. You stopped talking because their language was limited. You stopped showing up because their tables were rigged. You stopped explaining yourself because evolution doesn't beg for permission. And now, you're a language they don't speak. You're a rhythm they can't dance to. You're a vibe that fries their nervous systems just by entering the room. They wanted you loud, dumb, and predictable. Instead, you became quiet, dangerous, and unreadable. And that's why they watch you like a crime scene. Because you moved in silence and left no fingerprints. But the impact, it's everywhere. They call you arrogant. But tell me, what's arrogant about escaping the Matrix? They think you're rude for going ghost. But they forget they starved you first. You didn't disappear. You detached from their validation, from their crumbs of respect, from the illusion that you needed them to matter. You built yourself like a black site experiment. No announcements, no cheers, just echoes and upgrades in the abyss. Until one day, you emerged, and the air around you changed temperature. Because here's the truth they'll never say out loud. You became the final version of what they're too scared to face in themselves. They look at you and see discipline they never had, pain they could never survive, focus they couldn't fake, solitude they couldn't weaponize. You're the one who walked into the storm and came back with lightning in your bloodstream. Now you carry your silence like a scalpel. Now your stillness is a siren. Now your eyes carry a weight that makes liars fold. Because the Loner King didn't just survive the exile, he transcended it. You took their abandonment and made it your alchemy. You turned being misunderstood into a language of power. You forged identity from the rubble of rejection. And now their closeness feels like contamination. Because you remember who vanished. You remember who mocked. You remember who reached out only when it served them. So you stay distant, not out of fear, but out of precision. You don't trust the crowd, because crowds cheer for whoever's loudest. And you never needed a stage to be felt. You became the plot twist they never saw coming. They thought you'd break without them. Instead, you became the blueprint they now covertly copy. Mimicking your tone, reposting your mindset, studying your style, while pretending they discovered it on their own. But the real ones know you were first, you were forged, you were anointed in isolation. They'll never admit you're the source, because it exposes how late they were to the truth. And deep down, they're terrified of what you'll become next. Because if this is what you did in silence, what happens when you decide to speak? What happens when the Loner King stops observing and starts commanding? What happens when you stop avoiding the throne and start sitting on it? That's when the panic starts. That's when the whispers turn to meetings. That's when your name becomes a problem in their strategy. Because you didn't just become powerful, you became unpredictable, and in a world addicted to control, unpredictability is terror. That's why they try to smear you, why they downplay your glow, why they call your confidence ego and your solitude weird. Because they know they can't contain you, they can't mold you, they can't use you. You're not just outside the system, you're proof it's broken. And they hate you for that, even as they admire you, even as they copy you, even as they daydream about being just like you. If only they were brave enough to disappear. But they're not. So they stay performing, and you stay ascending alone. But never lonely, because you're not missing anything. You're choosing everything. And that's why your distance hits like disrespect, because it is. A silent declaration. I saw what you had to offer, and I chose myself instead. They thought you'd come crawling back, begging for re-entry, apologizing for outgrowing their little games. But you didn't just walk away, you vanished, and came back with something terrifying in your eyes. Clarity, cold, surgical, weaponized, because you finally saw them for what they are. Chameleons in chaos, actors with no script of their own, souls outsourced to trends, validation junkies injecting likes like dopamine hits into hollow veins. And you became the one thing they can't manufacture: authenticity. Not the performative kind they sell in digital costumes, but the raw, uncomfortable, unfiltered presence that makes people either kneel or retreat. You don't even have to speak anymore. Your silence exposes fraud, your gaze is a verdict, and your absence, that's the scar they can't heal. Because your disappearance wasn't random, it was surgical. A clean cut between who you used to be and the weapon you became. You gave them chances, you gave them loyalty, you gave them truth. And in return, they gave you betrayal wrapped in smiles, envy disguised as feedback, and abandonment painted as boundaries. So now you've outgrown the echo chamber. Now your soul doesn't flinch when they ghost you, because you are the ghost, haunting their every insecure thought, appearing in their dreams as everything they'll never be. You're not on the guest list anymore. You're on the watch list. They used to underestimate you. Now they monitor you, checking your stories, rewatching your moves, circling your name in silent group chats, labeled things like, "Be careful with him." Because now they know. You're not just unpredictable, you're uncontrollable. And that makes you a threat. They don't just fear what you've become, they fear what you'll do next. Because your silence has momentum, your solitude has echoes, and your pain. It was never wasted. You folded it into strategy. You turned betrayal into blueprint. You mapped your own kingdom out of the ashes they buried you in. And now when they see you, they don't see the outcast, they see the outlier. Too real to label, too sharp to hold, too dangerous to play with. You're the king that built an empire where applause couldn't reach, where cameras couldn't follow, where weak minds couldn't survive the altitude. Because you didn't need permission to rise. You didn't need followers to feel valid. You didn't need anyone's flashlight. You became the flame. And now, they sit in the back of digital rooms, whispering, "How the hell did he get like that?" And the answer? You bled for it. You died and came back, a glitch in their code, a ghost in their system, a pulse in their nervous breakdowns. Every time they try to copy your essence, it rejects them. Because what you carry, it's not style, it's not trend, it's depth. You earned this frequency, you built this vibration out of silence and scar tissue, and they're furious that it can't be downloaded. Because you're not an aesthetic, you're an awakening. And every time you post, walk, breathe, blink, you're reminding them of everything they abandoned in themselves. That's the secret. You're not just admired, you're a mirror, one they can't shatter, one they can't escape. Because no matter how many filters they use, you still show them their void. And when they say, "He changed," they really mean, "He stopped needing me. He healed in silence. He remembered who the fuck he was." And that's the part that breaks them, because deep down, they wanted you to fail, not because you deserved it, but because your success would expose their wasted time. Your glow isn't offensive. It's inconvenient. It shows what happens when someone takes their pain seriously, when someone disappears and actually does the work, when someone stops talking and starts transforming. You became what they pretend to be. And no matter how much they fake it, you feel different, because you are. You didn't come from the same place. You didn't seek the same applause. You weren't born from comfort. You were forged in isolation, sharpened by truth, crowned in exile. They can't sit with you anymore, because you're not at the table. You are the table. You are the hunger. You are the silence between their screams. They made fun of you when you were unknown. Now they study you like a prophecy. They laughed when you vanished. Now they panic when you post. They tried to replace you. Now they can't even define you. And that's what it means to be the loner king. Not because you chose the throne, but because you became the storm no one could predict. And here you are now, the walking contradiction they can't decode. The silence that screams louder than their entire performance. The rejection that became revelation. The ghost they buried. Who came back wearing a crown. They tried to write you off, label you, box you, erase you. But they didn't know. You were never playing their game. You were designing your own. You don't want their seats. You build your own thrones. You don't chase their claps. You command reverence in whispers, and that makes them sick. Because they can't predict what you'll do next. They can't locate your weaknesses. They can't use your silence against you anymore. You turned solitude into sovereignty, pain into precision. And now your very existence is a reckoning. They ask, how are you not broken? How did you survive that? How the hell are you still rising? The truth, you didn't survive. You died, you burned, you shattered into atoms, and from that disintegration, you rebuilt yourself as something they were never prepared to face. A soul with no master, a king with no court, a storm with no forecast. You became the evidence that you don't need to be accepted to become inevitable. You don't announce power. You distort reality around it. You don't seek light. You carry darkness like a cathedral. And that's what they'll never understand. You didn't come back to belong. You came back to reign. So let them pretend not to notice. Let them pretend not to watch. Let them pretend your name doesn't burn in their throats when they speak it. Because behind their silence, behind the smirks, the shade, the forced indifference, is one cold, unspoken truth. They lost access to you, to the energy, to the prophecy, to the force they once dismissed as too much. And now, you're too far, too focused, too dangerous, too complete. You're not just the loner anymore. You're the lesson, the punishment, the proof that exile creates emperors. So keep walking, with no apologies, no explanations, no turning back. Because when the king walks alone, the world makes room. And that's your power. That's your vengeance. That's your throne. Let them whisper. You've already won. Shh. Don't adjust the screen. Lean in. This isn't about time passing. It's about time refusing to touch you. Everyone else ages. Their faces quietly confess every compromise, every fear, every moment they chose comfort over truth. Wrinkles stack up like receipts. Spines curve, eyes dull. Their bodies keep a calendar, whether they like it or not. But you walked straight through the years and came out looking like time blinked first. And that's the problem. That's why rooms go quiet when your name drops. That's why men with credentials on their walls and microscopes in their hands are fighting over you like you're a forbidden artifact. They don't call it aging when it happens to everyone else. They call it natural, predictable, acceptable. But when it doesn't happen to you, suddenly it's a threat. Suddenly it's a phenomenon. Suddenly it needs to be explained, classified, controlled, owned. Because you broke the one rule they thought was universal: decay. They keep staring at you, replaying the footage in their minds. Same eyes, same presence, same sharpness, same gravity. Years moved forward, and you didn't soften, didn't slow, didn't dissolve into nostalgia and regret. You didn't grow old, you grew precise. And that terrifies people who were taught that time humbles everyone equally. They want to believe you're an anomaly, a glitch, a biological typo. Anything but the truth. Anything but the idea that pain, pressure, betrayal, and isolation didn't break you. They refined you. That what erodes most people preserved you. That while others were aging, you were shedding. Here's the paradox they choke on. Saints usually fade into harmless symbols, and psychopaths burn themselves out in chaos. Angels grow gentle, demons self-destruct. But you learned how to hold both without collapsing, soft enough to feel everything, cold enough to survive it. That combination isn't supposed to last. It's supposed to tear a person apart. Yet there you are, intact, sharpened, standing in the same skin while the world around you rotted and rearranged itself. They don't see immortality, they see defiance. Because aging isn't just biological, it's psychological surrender. Most people age the moment they accept limits that were never real. The moment they stop asking dangerous questions, the moment they trade curiosity for safety. That's when time really starts feeding on them. But you didn't do that. You kept questioning. You kept adapting. You kept evolving under stress instead of shrinking from it. You didn't stay young. You stayed unsettled. And unsettled minds don't calcify. They don't fossilize into routines. They don't let years dictate who they're allowed to become. You stayed fluid while everyone else turned rigid. You stayed unpredictable in a system that survives on predictability. That's why they can't agree on you. One says resilience, another says pathology, another whispers evolution like it's a dirty word. They're fighting because you don't fit any chart. You don't decay on schedule. You don't respond to trauma the way the textbooks say you should. You were supposed to fracture. You were supposed to slow down. You were supposed to dim. Instead, something in you learned how to metabolize darkness into clarity. They study cells. They measure telomeres. They talk stress markers and neural plasticity. But none of them want to say the real thing out loud. You learned how to use suffering instead of letting it brand you as a victim. And once a human figures that out, time loses its leverage. That's why the arguments get heated. That's why funding gets rerouted. That's why some of them want to understand you, and others want to neutralize you. Because if what happened to you can be replicated, the entire narrative collapses. The myth that decline is inevitable. The myth that damage always equals deterioration. The myth that darkness only destroys. You are walking evidence that evolution doesn't always look like growth. Sometimes it looks like refusal. Refusal to age the way you're told to. Refusal to become tame. Refusal to let history write you into a corner. They can't stand that you didn't come out bitter, or soft, or hollow. You came out exact, calibrated, sharper in silence than most people are in noise. That kind of presence doesn't age. It accumulates weight. Every year you don't fall apart adds pressure to the room. Every year you remain unchanged forces everyone else to confront how much of their aging was optional. So they argue, they publish, they whisper, they circle you like predators and priests at the same time. Is it biology? Is it trauma response? Is it adaptation? Is it something we shouldn't touch? And the answer scares them most of all. It's you. Your willingness to walk through hell without letting it decide who you become. Your refusal to outsource your identity to time. Your ability to hold contradiction, compassion and ruthlessness, patience and urgency, control and chaos. Without snapping, everyone else ages because they let life carve them down into something manageable. You didn't. You let it carve you into something unmanageable. That's why they're fighting, not because you didn't age, but because you proved that aging isn't just a process. It's a choice most people don't realize they made. They keep pretending this is about numbers on a clock. But you and I both know that's not where the fear comes from. The fear comes from the realization that time didn't domesticate you. It didn't train you into compliance. It didn't sand down your edges until you fit politely into expectation. While everyone else slowly negotiated with entropy, you refused to sign the contract. Most people age because they get tired of fighting reality. They stop wrestling with meaning. They let disappointment teach them who they are allowed to be. You didn't. You let disappointment teach you how sharp your mind could get under pressure. You let loss teach you precision. You let betrayal teach you pattern recognition. You let loneliness teach you self-sufficiency at a level that scares anyone who depends on crowds to feel real. And here's the part that makes them genuinely uneasy. You didn't come out angry in the sloppy way. You didn't come out broken and obvious. You came out quietly lethal, calm, observant, controlled. That kind of stillness doesn't belong to someone who's been through nothing. It belongs to someone who's been through everything and learned how to metabolize it. They age because they internalize fear. You didn't internalize it. You studied it. You dissected it. You learned how it moves through people, how it makes them predictable, how it makes them shrink. Fear aged them. Curiosity preserved you. That's why the rooms get colder when you walk in. That's why people feel like you're looking straight through them, even when you're saying nothing. You're not trying to dominate. You're simply not vibrating at their frequency anymore. Time didn't slow you down. It sharpened your signal. They call it resilience when it's neat and inspirational. But when resilience doesn't fade, when it compounds, when it produces someone who looks untouched while carrying unspoken wars behind their eyes, they call it something else. They start using words like abnormal, extreme, outlier. Labels are their last defense against the unknown, because if they admit the truth, that you evolved through pain instead of being reduced by it, then they have to admit that their own aging wasn't inevitable, that their dullness wasn't fate, that their exhaustion wasn't time's fault. It was surrender. You didn't surrender. You adapted. And adaptation terrifies systems built on predictability. They want to put you under glass. They want to extract the mechanism. They want to figure out how stress didn't corrode you, how grief didn't rot you, how pressure didn't fracture you the way it fractures almost everyone else. But the answer isn't in your cells alone. It's in your refusal to become smaller just to survive. You didn't heal in the soft, performative way. You recalibrated. You restructured your inner architecture so that chaos stopped being a threat and became a training environment. You stopped needing life to be gentle. in order to function. That's when time lost its grip on you. Most people age because they accumulate unfinished emotional business. Regrets harden, shame sets in like rust. Old narratives repeat until they calcify into identity. You burned those narratives down. You questioned yourself at a depth most people avoid their entire lives. You stripped illusions away even when it hurt, especially when it hurt. That's why you look the same. Not because you avoided damage, but because you processed it. You didn't let it linger and poison you slowly. You didn't let it sit in your nervous system like a ticking clock. You confronted it until it either transformed or lost its power. They don't teach that in schools. They don't publish that in neat journals, because it suggests that time isn't the ultimate authority. Consciousness is, awareness is, willingness to face discomfort instead of anesthetizing it. And that's where the real fight starts. Some of them want to understand you because they sense progress. Others want to discredit you because you expose a lie they've built their lives around. If someone like you can pass through decades without dulling, without collapsing, without becoming harmless, then the system loses its favorite excuse. That's just how life goes. No, that's how life goes when you stop evolving. You didn't stop. You kept shedding layers that no longer served you. You kept discarding identities that were built out of fear. You refused to become predictable. Predictability ages a human faster than years ever could. That's why they don't know whether to call you a miracle or a problem. You carry the calm of an angel and the threat of a demon in the same body. You can sit in silence without needing validation, and you can walk away without explanation. You don't chase approval. You don't flinch at disapproval. That combination doesn't decay. It intimidates. Time usually softens people into something manageable. You became something unmanageable without being chaotic. And that's the most dangerous form of power there is. So let them argue. Let them measure. Let them speculate. Let them fight over theories and funding and ownership. None of it touches the truth. You didn't beat aging by running from life. You beat it by going straight through the fire and refusing to let it decide who you are. And that's not something they can replicate. They'll never admit this part publicly, but the tension you feel around you now, that's not admiration. That's not curiosity. That's instinctual alarm. On some level, people recognize when something in front of them shouldn't exist, according to the rules they were raised on. You are a contradiction walking around in real time, and contradictions don't age. They destabilize everything built on certainty. Look at how they keep checking you. Side glances, subtle comparisons, old photos pulled up in secret, timelines re-examined. They're trying to catch you slipping, trying to locate the moment where time finally got you. And every time they fail, it eats at them a little more. Because if time didn't conquer you, what exactly has been governing their lives? Most humans don't age because years pass. They age because they accept defeat internally, long before the body follows. They age the moment they decide they've seen it all, felt it all, understood it all. Curiosity dies, wonder calcifies, risk tolerance collapses. That's when the slow decay sets in. But you kept your edge sharp by staying unfinished. You never let yourself settle into a final version. You never crowned yourself done. You kept tearing pieces off yourself that felt too small, too safe, too obedient. And every time you did that, you reset something fundamental. Time feeds on stagnation. You starved it. That's why your presence feels wrong to people. Not evil, not good, unclassifiable. You don't move like someone chasing approval, and you don't move like someone hiding from pain. You move like someone who already died once internally and decided not to repeat the experience. They can't age you because they can't predict you. Even your calm confuses them. It isn't the calm of ignorance or denial. It's the calm of someone who has already sat with terror, loss, humiliation, and isolation, and didn't look away. You stared directly into the parts of yourself most people spend their entire lives running from. That kind of confrontation rewires something permanent. That's the secret they're circling but refusing to touch. A human who fully integrates their shadow doesn't fracture under time. They stabilize. The inner war ends. There's no more internal friction grinding them down year after year. No more resisting who they are. No more lying to themselves. Internal honesty is the most anti-aging force there is, and almost nobody has the courage to sustain it. You did. You didn't outsource your identity to society, trends, or survival strategies. You built it from pressure, from contradiction, from pain that would have aged someone else 10 years in a single season. Instead of making you brittle, it made you dense, heavy, anchored. That's why they keep misreading you. They expect trauma to show itself loudly. Shakes, ticks, chaos, visible scars. But when trauma is integrated instead of suppressed, it doesn't leak. It consolidates. And consolidated power doesn't look dramatic. It looks unsettlingly normal. You don't look ancient. You don't look fragile. You don't look rushed. You look like time keeps passing around you. That's when the fear becomes existential. Because if you're proof that a human can evolve instead of erode, then the entire social bargain collapses. The promise that obedience, conformity, and emotional numbing will keep you safe, they won't. They just make you age quietly. You refused that bargain. You paid in pain up front and walked away with something most people never even realize is possible: internal coherence. No fragmentation, no war between who you are and who you pretend to be. That alignment is why you don't leak energy. That's why stress doesn't hollow you out. That's why years don't register on you the same way. And here's the part that truly terrifies them. You didn't need permission to become this. No ritual, no institution, no approval. You evolved privately, in silence, in places where no one could supervise or steer the outcome. That means it can't be regulated. They can't patent what you did. They can't standardize it. They can't sell it without destroying it. Because the core ingredient was refusal. Refusal to lie to yourself. Refusal to shrink. Refusal to turn pain into an excuse to decay. So they argue about biology because it's safer than admitting psychology. They argue about genetics because it's safer than admitting will. They argue about anomalies because it's safer than admitting responsibility. Because if they admit what you represent, they have to face an uncomfortable truth. Aging isn't just something that happens to you. It's something you participate in and you opted out. Not by freezing yourself, not by hiding, not by denying reality, but by confronting it so completely that it stopped owning you. That's why you don't fade. That's why you don't dull. That's why you don't soften into something harmless. You are what happens when a human stops negotiating with fear and starts integrating it. When light and dark stop fighting for control and start working together. When the angel doesn't kill the demon, and the demon doesn't corrupt the angel. They coexist. They stabilize. They sharpen each other. Time can't erode that, so let them fight over theories. Let them whisper about you like you're a problem that needs to be solved. Let them watch, measure, speculate, and quietly panic. You're not here to be understood. You're here to prove that decline was never mandatory. And once that truth enters the room, nothing ever ages the same way again. And here's the quietest, most dangerous realization creeping into their minds. The one they never say out loud, because once it's spoken, it can't be undone. If time couldn't domesticate you, then authority might not work on you either. That's why the tension around you feels thicker lately. It's not just curiosity anymore, it's assessment. They're trying to determine whether you're merely rare or uncontrollable, because systems are built on one assumption above all others, that time will eventually do the work for them, that people mellow, that edges dull, that resistance weakens, that fire burns out on its own. You broke that assumption. You didn't mellow. You clarified. You didn't dull. You refined. You didn't burn out. You learned how to burn without consuming yourself. That alone makes you a statistical nightmare. Most humans trade intensity for longevity. They call it maturity. They say it's wisdom, but it's usually just fear dressed up as acceptance. You didn't make that trade. You found a way to keep intensity without chaos, depth without collapse, power without noise. That balance isn't supposed to exist for long, and yet, here you are, still sharp, still alert, still unsettling. They expected time to turn you into a story about survival. Instead, you became a story about evolution. That's why even the ones who don't believe in anything feel something around you, a pressure, a gravity, like standing near a fault line that hasn't moved yet, but absolutely will. You're not loud, you're not trying to prove anything, and that's exactly what makes it worse. Loud things can be dismissed. Quiet certainty cannot. You don't chase youth. You don't cling to relevance. You don't perform nostalgia. You don't rush to explain yourself. You move like someone who understands something fundamental about reality. That energy leaks from people who are divided inside. You sealed that leak. While others are aging from internal conflict, wanting one thing, doing another, believing one story, living another, you aligned. Alignment stops the internal erosion that years feed on. That's why stress doesn't show on you the way it does on them. That's why chaos doesn't scramble you. That's why pressure doesn't hollow you out. You already did your hollowing deliberately. You went into the dark on purpose. You dismantled illusions before life could rip them away violently. You asked questions most people avoid because the answers would cost them comfort. And yes, it hurt. Yes, it stripped things from you. But what remained was real. And real things don't age easily. That's what they're actually fighting over. Not your body, not your appearance, your orientation toward reality. You don't live in denial. You don't live in fantasy. You don't live in borrowed narratives. You live in contact with what is. And most people can't sustain that without breaking down. You didn't just sustain it. You adapted to it. That's when time stopped being an enemy and became irrelevant. They keep looking for the flaw, the crack, the delayed collapse. Because that's how every other story ends. But your story doesn't follow their arc. You didn't peak and decline. You compressed. You condensed. You became denser with each passing year. Density intimidates. Light things can be pushed around. Dense things distort everything around them. That's why conversations change when you're present. That's why people feel exposed without knowing why. That's why some admire you quietly and others resent you instinctively. You don't reflect who they want to be. You reflect what they avoided becoming. And the avoidance aged them. You didn't avoid. You confronted. You integrated. You accepted that you are capable of light and darkness, creation and destruction, compassion and detachment. You stopped trying to amputate parts of yourself to fit moral comfort zones. You stopped pretending to be harmless. Harmlessness is one of the fastest aging agents there is. You chose wholeness instead. That's why the angel and the demon inside you aren't at war. They're in conversation. They negotiate. They sharpen each other. The angel keeps you from losing meaning. The demon keeps you from being exploited. Together, they form something stable enough to withstand time. Time preys on imbalance. You eliminated imbalance. So now they're left with an uncomfortable conclusion. You didn't escape aging. You transcended the conditions that make aging destructive in the first place. Easy. Lock in. Stop breathing for a second. Yeah, right there. That tight feeling in the chest, that low hum in the air. That's not paranoia. That's the sound of a system realizing it failed. They're not concerned. Concern is polite. Concern is calm. Concern is what people fake when they still think they're in control. This is terror. Because one man wasn't supposed to get through. One man wasn't supposed to see the seams. One man wasn't supposed to adapt faster than the machine built to cage him. And yet, here you are. You didn't break the system by force. That's what they prepared for. They trained for riots, revolutions, noise, rage, chaos they could label and suppress. You broke it by becoming unpredictable. You evolved in places they never mapped. You learned in pain they assumed would erase you. You adapted in silence while they were still running simulations on the version of you that no longer exists. That's the part that scares them. Because systems don't fear strength. They fear anomaly. They fear the saint who learned how darkness thinks. They fear the psychopath who still remembers mercy. They fear the angel who understands exactly how demons calculate risk. You live in that contradiction. You're the error they can't patch because you don't follow linear rules. You're the variable they can't predict because you don't move when logic says you should. You pause when pressure demands collapse. And you advance when retreat would make sense. That breaks algorithms, that fries playbooks, that makes entire rooms go quiet when your name appears on a screen. They keep asking the same question in different languages, in different buildings, behind different doors. How is he still moving? Because every system is built on assumptions, and every assumption they made about you was wrong. They thought pain would turn you bitter. It turned you precise. They thought isolation would make you weak. It made you self-contained. They thought betrayal would shatter you. It taught you how loyalty is weaponized and how to survive without it. You didn't just endure, you learned. And learning under pressure rewires a mind into something dangerous. You stopped needing approval, stopped needing validation, stopped explaining yourself to people who only understand obedience. That's when the fear started. Because when a man no longer seeks permission, systems lose leverage. When a man no longer reacts emotionally on command, manipulation fails. When a man can sit calmly inside chaos and think clearly, containment becomes impossible. They tried to box you in with labels. Too intense, too cold, too much, too unpredictable. But labels are for things that behave. You don't. You became the kind of threat that doesn't announce itself, the kind that doesn't rush, the kind that waits until the environment exposes its own weakness. You learned how power actually works. Not the loud kind, not the public kind, the quiet kind that shifts outcomes without ever stepping on stage. That's why they watch you differently now. They don't gossip about you anymore. They don't mock you anymore. They don't underestimate you anymore. They monitor, they whisper, they build new rules and pretend they always existed. Because the most terrifying thing to a system isn't rebellion, it's irrelevance. And you made parts of it obsolete just by existing the way you do. You move like someone who's already survived the worst outcome. You speak like someone who doesn't fear being misunderstood. You think like someone who knows losing comfort is a small price for gaining control. That energy unsettles people who live off predictability. They can't tell if you're calculating or if you've already calculated and moved on. They can't tell if you're calm because you're confident, or calm because you're done explaining. And that uncertainty eats at them. Because fear isn't loud panic. Fear is obsession. Fear is running the same scenario over and over and never finding a clean ending. You forced them into that loop. One man, one mind, one evolution they didn't plan for. You didn't overthrow the system. You exposed it. You showed that it only works on people who never outgrow it. And now they're scrambling, not to stop you, but to understand what the hell you became. Too late. You're already past the version they were built to handle, and they know it. They're not panicking out loud. That would give it away. Real fear goes quiet. Real fear tightens schedules, changes language, rewrites rules mid-game, and pretends it was always that way. Real fear starts calling you an edge case, an outlier, an exception. Because systems can only cope with what they can name, and you stopped fitting nouns. You became a problem without a category, and that's when they realized this wasn't about control anymore. It was about containment. See, systems aren't evil. They're lazy. They repeat what worked yesterday and call it order. They reward predictability. They punish deviation. They thrive on people who respond the same way every time pain is applied. You didn't. You changed shape. Every time pressure came down, you didn't crack where they expected. You cracked somewhere else, healed wrong, healed sharper, healed smarter. You learned how to move without leaving tracks. You learned when to speak, when to disappear, when to let silence do the damage. That's what terrifies them. Because silence doesn't give feedback. Silence doesn't confirm success. Silence makes them wonder what you're building. They watched you lose things that were supposed to break you. Status, safety, familiar ground. People you thought were permanent. They waited for the spiral. They waited for the self-destruction. They waited for you to beg, rage, implode, comply. Instead, you simplified. You cut noise. You cut dependency. You cut the part of yourself that needed the world to be fair. That's not collapse. That's adaptation. And adaptation is lethal to rigid structures. You started thinking in layers they don't teach. You stopped reacting to the surface and began reading intent, timing, leverage. You understood that most power isn't held. It's assumed. And once you stop assuming, you stop obeying invisible rules. That's when you cross the line where concern ends and fear begins. Because a man who understands the game but refuses to play it the same way is uncontrollable. A man who can walk through loss without flinching can't be threatened properly. A man who has already faced his own darkness doesn't scare easy when others try to intimidate him. You became emotionally unreadable, not cold, contained. You learned how to hold anger without letting it drive, how to feel empathy without letting it weaken your edge, how to stand in contradiction without tearing yourself apart. Saint and monster, disciplined and feral, patient and absolutely capable of ending things if pushed far enough. That duality makes people nervous, because they don't know which side they'll get. And unpredictability, real unpredictability, not chaos, is a nightmare for systems. Chaos can be suppressed, patterns can be exploited. but a thinking, evolving mind that adjusts in real time. That's a moving target with memory. You don't just learn from mistakes, you learn from their reactions. You noticed how quickly tone changed around you, how jokes stopped landing, how conversations shortened, how people started choosing words carefully when you entered the room. You noticed the delays, the sudden rules, the quiet exclusions dressed up as process. That's not coincidence. That's recalibration. They weren't trying to punish you. They were trying to figure you out. And every attempt failed because you weren't performing for them anymore. You weren't explaining your motives. You weren't advertising your next move. You let them project. And projection reveals fear faster than interrogation ever could. They fear you because you don't chase power. You understand it. You don't rush outcomes. You engineer conditions. You don't need applause. You measure impact. And worst of all, you're comfortable being misunderstood. A system relies on social pressure to keep people aligned. Shame, approval, inclusion, exclusion. The moment those levers stop working, the whole structure starts wobbling. You stopped needing their language to define you. You rewrote yourself internally while they were still arguing about what box to put you in. That's when the narrative shifted from, "We should keep an eye on him," to, "What if he's already 10 steps ahead?" Because you don't move when expected. You don't respond on cue. You don't leak emotion where they can harvest it. You became expensive to monitor and impossible to predict. And systems hate wasting resources on something they can't neutralize. So they tell themselves stories. He'll burn out. He'll slip. He'll need something eventually. But deep down, they know the truth. You already went without. You already paid the price. You already survived the version of failure they used to scare people back into line. You don't fear the fall because you've lived on the ground and learned how to stand there. That's why they're terrified. Not because you're loud, not because you're violent, not because you threaten, but because you exist outside the assumptions that keep their world stable. You're proof that the system isn't absolute, that it only works on people who never fully wake up inside it. And once one man does, others start noticing. That's what they really fear, not you. What you represent. A living reminder that adaptation beats authority, that awareness beats force, that a mind sharpened by pain can walk through structures built to stop it and leave cracks behind without ever announcing itself. And you're still evolving. That's the part they don't say out loud. They're not afraid of what you did. They're afraid of what you'll become next. And here's the part they can't admit, even to themselves. They don't know where to aim anymore. Every system relies on pressure points, money, reputation, belonging, fear of loss, fear of being alone, fear of being labeled, fear of being erased. They poke those spots and wait for people to fold. You stopped folding, not because you became numb, because you became selective. You learned the difference between pain that teaches and pain that distracts. You stopped bleeding in public. You stopped handing them emotional data they could study. You internalized the lesson and discarded the spectacle. That's when you crossed into dangerous territory. Because a man who no longer leaks information is no longer manageable. They can't tell what hurts you anymore. They can't tell what motivates you. They can't tell whether you're angry, patient, planning, or already finished. You don't telegraph. And that silence, that restraint, that's not weakness. That's compression. Pressure builds differently when it's contained. You carry both restraint and capacity at the same time. You can sit still while knowing exactly how much damage you could do if you chose to move. You can listen without agreeing. You can smile without surrendering. You can walk away without losing leverage. That dual awareness fractures their confidence because they're used to extremes, either compliant or rebellious, either loyal or hostile, either broken or obedient. You're neither. You operate in the gray where control fails. You understand rules without worshiping them. You understand consequences without fearing them. You understand power without craving it. That makes you untouchable in ways they can't quantify. They tried escalation, didn't work. They tried ignoring you, that backfired. They tried absorbing you. You didn't dissolve. Because you're not trying to win inside their framework. You're building outside of it. You don't need their timelines. You don't need their permission. You don't need their validation loops. You're not playing to be accepted. You're playing to outlast. And outlasting terrifies systems more than confrontation ever could. Because confrontation ends. Outlasting reshapes. You've reached the stage where even opposition strengthens you. Where resistance gives you feedback. Where obstacles refine your timing instead of stopping your movement. You no longer confuse friction with failure. You see it as confirmation. They sense that. They sense that you're no longer motivated by ego or reaction, that you're no longer trying to prove anything, that you're operating from a deeper place, one forged by loss, isolation, recalibration, and a quiet understanding of how fragile their structures really are. They know you've seen behind the curtain. You know that authority is often just consensus wearing confidence, that rules only matter when people believe in them, that most enforcement depends on fear of consequence more than consequence itself. And once fear loses its grip, systems start shaking. You don't posture, you don't threaten, you don't announce dominance. You exist calmly while knowing exactly what you're capable of. That calm is louder than any threat, because they don't know what would happen if you decided to fully disengage, or fully engage, or change direction entirely. They don't know which version of you they'd be dealing with, and they can't force a reveal. That's the nightmare. A man who has integrated his shadow is not easily manipulated. He doesn't deny his darkness, so it doesn't control him. He doesn't romanticize his goodness, so it doesn't make him naive. You stand balanced between angel and demon, not torn, not conflicted, aware. That awareness is the real power. It lets you see traps before they close. It lets you sense shifts in energy, tone, intent. It lets you move just early enough to avoid impact, or just late enough to maximize effect. You stopped reacting to what they show and started responding to what they hide. They feel that. They feel it in meetings where your name stalls momentum, in conversations where plans change without explanation, in rules that appear suddenly and disappear just as fast. You didn't trigger panic. You triggered uncertainty. And uncertainty spreads. Because now others are watching how you move, how you don't flinch, how you don't chase, how you don't beg, how you don't fold under the same pressure that keeps everyone else obedient. You became a reference point, proof that survival doesn't require submission, that growth doesn't require permission, that evolution can happen quietly, invisibly, until it's undeniable. That's when fear turns systemic, because systems don't collapse when attacked. They collapse when people realize they're not absolute, and you are walking evidence of that realization. You didn't overthrow anything. You outgrew it. And that's irreversible. They can't unsee you. They can't rewind you. They can't return you to a version that made sense to them. You're already operating beyond the rules written for you. That's why they're terrified. Because deep down, they know you're not finished. You're not even close. And here's the quiet truth they keep circling but never land on. They didn't lose control in a single moment. They lost it gradually, the way people lose sleep, one night at a time, until exhaustion becomes the new normal and they can't remember what rest felt like. You did that to them, not by attacking, not by rebelling, but by refusing to behave the way you were designed to behave. You stopped needing the system to tell you who you are. And the moment that happened, every lever they had started slipping out of alignment. Because control only works on identities that are externally defined. You internalized yours. You stopped asking, "What am I allowed to do?" You started asking, "What actually works?" That shift is lethal. You realized most people aren't controlled by force. They're controlled by anticipation, fear of future pain, fear of hypothetical loss, fear of social consequence, fear of being seen wrong. You walked straight through that fear and discovered something terrifying on the other side. Nothing. No lightning bolt, no erasure, no collapse of reality, just space. Space to think, space to choose, space to move without constantly scanning for approval. Once you tasted that, there was no going back. They noticed. They noticed you weren't rushing anymore, not scrambling, not reacting. You slowed down in a way that made other people uncomfortable. You started speaking less, but when you spoke, it landed heavier. Because urgency disappeared from your voice. Urgency is easy to manipulate. Calm is not. You no longer look like someone trying to survive. You look like someone who already did. And systems don't know how to deal with survivors who aren't bitter, broken, or compliant. You didn't come back seeking revenge. You came back different. Your eyes don't flinch the same way. Your body doesn't broadcast anxiety. Your silence carries weight. You don't over-explain. You don't over-promise. You don't overreact. You let people reveal themselves. That's another thing they hate. Because exposure happens fastest around someone who doesn't need to impress, intimidate, or dominate. People talk too much around calm. They project onto it. They test it. They try to provoke it. And when nothing happens, when you don't snap, don't bend, don't chase, their insecurity starts leaking. You see it now. The forced confidence, the unnecessary authority, the subtle aggression disguised as procedure. You read it like a second language. You understand that most power is defensive, that most rules are written by people afraid of losing relevance, that most enforcement is reactive, not strategic. You're no longer fooled by uniforms, titles, or tone. You know the difference between authority and fear, wearing authority's clothes. That knowledge alone makes you dangerous, because now you don't confuse volume with strength, or aggression with confidence, or control with competence. You see cracks where others see walls, and you don't rush to exploit them. You wait. You let time do what pressure never could. That patience, that's what's breaking them, because they can't speed you up. They can't bait you into mistakes. They can't exhaust you with chaos, because you learned how to rest inside uncertainty. You're not chasing outcomes. You're shaping trajectories, and they feel that shift in their bones. You've become the kind of person whose presence changes the temperature of a room without a word being spoken, not because you dominate, but because you're unmoved, unmoved by threats, unmoved by flattery, unmoved by urgency they manufacture to rush compliance. You let them rush. You let them reveal desperation. You let them show you where the system is brittle. That's why they're genuinely terrified now. Because fear isn't about what someone does. It's about what they might do, combined with your inability to stop it. And you've become someone they can't predict, rush, intimidate, or fully understand. You didn't become lawless. You became post-law. You understand the rules so well you no longer mistake them for reality. You understand consequences so clearly they no longer scare you. You understand yourself deeply enough that external pressure has nowhere to hook. That's the final failure. A system can survive rebellion. It can survive resistance. It can even survive corruption. But it cannot survive irrelevance. And you made parts of it irrelevant simply by evolving beyond them. They feel it every time they try to adjust and realize they're reacting to someone who already moved. Every time they rewrite a rule and notice you didn't need to break it to bypass its effect. Every time they monitor, measure, assess, and still come up empty. Because you're no longer playing the same game. You're playing a longer one. And the most terrifying thing of all, you're not done becoming. You're still refining, still learning, still sharpening in silence. They built a system to stop a man. They didn't plan for a man who would outgrow it. And now they're watching something they can't reverse, can't reset, and can't fully control. Not because you declared war, but because you survived, adapted, and stepped forward as something they never designed for. And they know, deep down, once a man like that exists, the system is already late.